evening and welcome. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps in the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manju Shri, please accomplish this. Good evening, nice to see everyone. So we continue this evening with the chapter on preliminaries. And hopefully make it through Mahamudra approaches and Shamatha, enter into the Shamatha chapter finally, Mahamudra Shamatha. So we're on the bottom of page 168 of the preliminaries, where it's part 2, what is to be done prior to the meditation processes themselves, which has 2 parts. The particulars of what is to be known first is the first of those. We should train in the 5 qualities conducive to liberation taught in the Compendium of Abhidharma, which is a text by Asanga. Ethical conduct for ordinary beings, turning our mind from any attitude or behavior that involves the basis of harm to others and habituating ourselves to the mindset that renounces such intentions or actions is the practice of ethical conduct. Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara says there is nowhere fishes and the like can go that they will not be killed. The achievement of a mindset that renounces such actions is explained as the paramita of ethical conduct. We preserve our ethical conduct by having mindfulness and alertness, by being conscientious about whatever precepts we have, such as the vows of an upasika, which is the first level of becoming a ordained monk or nun, and by avoiding all unwholesome conduct involving misdeeds. The Garjana's letter to a friend, one of his friends, observes, just as the earth supports all that moves and is still, ethical conduct is said to be the basis for all virtues. So this is the very common and prevalent and important, powerful, standard approach to the path that ethical conduct is the foundation for everything else. The Sutra on Ethical Conduct states, just as the blind cannot see forms, so it is that those without ethics cannot see the Dharma. Restraining the sense faculties, following the arising of any of the 6 sense consciousnesses, which are based on the 6 objects, such as forms, and the 6 sense faculties, such as the visual one. We should control our mental consciousness and not be attached to any of the 6 attractive objects or feel aversion for any of the 6 unattractive ones that may arise. What an interesting approach to sense consciousness. Like as you recognize the process of transferring sense consciousness to mental consciousness, you relax the response to it. Without grasping at characteristics or signs, we keep our mind away from desire and aggression and rest it on something virtuous or neutral. As the sutras say, the eyes see forms, but do not grasp at characteristics or signs. So it's like being inside the house with 6 windows and just impartially observing whatever comes in those those windows without reacting to them. Alert behavior. Whenever we do something such as a physical activity, we should engage conscientiously, being mindful of and alert to adopting what is appropriate and avoiding what is inappropriate. Shanti Deva says, repeatedly examine the condition of your body and mind. That alone sums up the definition of what it means to protect alertness. Constantly checking ourselves, checking in with what we're up to. The verses that summarize the Prajnaparamita Sutras advises walk, move, sleep, and sit with alertness. These are the 4 postures that human beings inhabit, famously presented by the Buddha as the 4 postures: walking, move, sleep, and sit. Actually, move and walk are usually the same. So, sleep, lie down, stand. There's no stand here. Interesting. The sutras say when you engage in activity, recognize that and think, I am active. In some traditions in Theravada practice, every time you move, you mentally note the movement. Every time you experience a sense object, you mentally note the sense impression. Every time you think, you mentally note that. So all of your time is preoccupied basically with mentally noting whatever occurs in your body, speech, and mind. From flexing your arm to retracting your arm. When you stand, notice that thinking, I'm standing. When you sit, be aware of that and think, I am sitting. There are many similar statements. The purpose of this is explained in the sutra called the Heap of Jewels. If you always turn to mindfulness and alertness, you will not be affected by mistaken notions. Moderation of food. If we eat only a very small amount of food, we will feel hungry and weak. If we consume too much, our body will feel heavy and our drowsiness and dullness will increase. Indigestible or unwholesome food provokes new or old illnesses. Fast food in particular is one of the worst things for you. Oh, it doesn't say that, sorry. All of those will make our body unsuitable for spiritual practices. I remember a number of years ago, Dzongkhar Khyentse Rinpoche asked people to take a vow never to go to a fast food restaurant, McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King. Food involving the mental afflictions of attachment, aversion, and so forth causes us to commit misdeeds and makes our minds unsuitable for spiritual practices. We should consume food that does not fall into those categories, relying on it as we do medicine, and eat moderately, just what we need to sustain our body. I took that vow, by the way. I highly recommend it. Never to go to McDonald's, Burger King, or Wendy's. The letter to a friend Garjana wrote to his one and only friend. Take food appropriately, like medicine, without desire, aversion. Do not eat out of pride or arrogance, or for the sake of satiation. Eat only to sustain your body. That's something that we all should do, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. Eating too much is not helpful. This point rests on contemplating the disadvantages of craving food. We should consider that no matter what kind of food it is, as soon as we eat it, it becomes something unpleasant, like vomit. It can also cause physical disease, and it creates unclean substances, which in the end must be excreted. We undergo many difficulties and sufferings for the sake of food and the causes of food. Food arouses our attachment, aversion, and confusion. It causes us to engage in negative actions and the like, such that in the end we will fall to the lower realms. we should reflect upon how enjoying moderation benefits our patrons, nourishes the microorganisms our body, and enables us to work for the welfare of sentient beings. These points are discussed by the noble Asanga. When they track the causes of climate change, the industry that is the most responsible for it is agriculture. That's the greatest impact. Or food production in general. Exertion and yoga during the first and last periods of the night instead of sleeping. We should be diligent in practicing yoga, meditation, with mindfulness and alertness throughout the day and during 2/3 of the night, the first and last periods. By yoga here they mean meditation. And this is a system of dividing the day into watches. The idea like somebody's got to stay up and watch during the night so that the snakes and other animals don't come in and kill people, right? Or if you're on a boat. And in the West, there seems to be a system of 8 watches of 3 hours each, but in the East, the system is more common of 6 watches or periods a day of 4 hours each. So it's like 6 to 10, 10 to 2, and then 2 to 6 are the 3 periods of the night. So the Buddha always said to practice meditation, sitting and walking during the first and third watches, and to only sleep 4 hours a night. Very different from what most Western doctors prescribe. The verses that summarize the Prajnaparamita Sutras teach the Prajnaparamita Samchayagata. Diligence will not obscure virtuous qualities. It uncovers the victor's treasure, infinite wisdom. Nagarjuna says, wise one, recite all day and also during the first and last periods of the night. Then in the interim, sleep with mindfulness so that your time of sleep is not wasted. We may wonder, what do those statements imply about how we should conduct ourselves during sleep? There are 4 aspects. How to sleep. Our physical deportment, our posture. During the middle third of the night, we should lie on our right side with our left leg resting on top of our right and sleep like a slumbering lion. How many of you do this? Sleep on your right side. All right, good for you. I have to sleep on my back because of back problems, but I remember early on in Buddhism, I read this and I was like, oh, okay, and I did that. Slowly slept on my right side if I could.
It's actually good for your heart because it has
Yeah,
your heart on the upside.
yeah, it's got the upside. I like the description, the upside. It is explained that that posture is a key technique that naturally prevents our body becoming overly relaxed. God forbid you would like fall into a deep sleep, becoming heavy, our mindfulness lapsing while we are sleeping, and our dreams being bad ones or involving negative actions. Mindfulness, until we fall asleep, we should maintain mindfulness of whatever is our specific object of meditation during the day. It's explained that such mindfulness will lead us to spiritual practice also during our sleep. Alertness. While we're practicing mindfulness, we must recognize when mental afflictions or the like arise and abandon them. It is said that alertness will diminish our delusion during sleep and dreams. The mental orientation for waking up since sleep increases the regenerative elements in our body. We should sleep for a small amount of time in order to strengthen it. When we should set the stage by thinking, I will rise early and exert myself in spiritual practices. Then we should visualize shining light and go to sleep concentrating on that. It is taught that this prevents our mind from sinking into darkness, keeps our sleep light, wakes us up on time, and increases our diligence for spiritual practices during the early morning. I don't know if anyone does that, but like as you go to sleep at night, you think, I'm going to get up bright and early. The early worm catches the bird or something like that. maybe the other way around. The way to maintain sessions, generally speaking, it is explained that we should engage in our spiritual practices in 2 or 3 sessions each day. There are, however, also many instructions to do 4 sessions, and that is the custom in this practice lineage. So, if you ever do a formal, full retreat in this tradition, you're supposed to do 4 sessions a day: before breakfast, after, between breakfast, and then between breakfast and lunch, lunch and dinner, and then after dinner. And it used to be like the sessions would be like 3 to 4 hours, supposedly. Um, they are specified as being at dawn, in the morning, afternoon, and evening. We should know that each session has preparatory practices, main practices, and concluding practices. So if you're doing a sadhana practice, for example, it has that. It has opening and then closing rituals. Preparatory practices, if you have the 3 representations of awakened body, speech, and mind, arrange them on
Krishna,
a shrine. Yes.
could you please say something about that sentence? About the
Yeah.
3 representations that
Yeah.
you use
Place whatever
always.
offerings you may have before them. So that's traditionally in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. The essential aspects of a shrine are that there's representations of the body, speech, and mind of the enlightened ones, and that is that creates a complete shrine, including and then you add offerings to those representations. Offerings of water, light, and incense are the traditional 3 types of offering. And so, representation of speech. What's the representation of the speech of the enlightened ones?
Dharma.
Dharma, a book, right? A
Yeah.
Dharma book,
Book.
Dharma
Yeah.
text of some sort. So that should be on the shrine. What's the representation of the body of an enlightened one?
Could be a rupa.
Could be a rupa, which is a Sanskrit for statue of an
Oh,
enlightened, some sort of enlightened form, or it could be a
picture.
picture. Picture could
Yeah.
be a picture,
Tonka.
photograph, or tonka, painting. Yeah, some
Little
sort of
stupa,
visual. Sorry.
a small stupa.
The stupa is the representation of something else. What is it the representation of?
Mine?
The mind. Yeah, the stupa is the mind of the Buddha. All
Oh,
right, Debbie. Yeah, so
super.
there's representations of the mind of the Buddha. All right, Cynthia. I have the Eiffel Tower on mine. Is that a stupa? It looks like a stupa, doesn't it? The Eiffel
Eh,
Tower.
I don't think so.
Close.
Has some similarities, but no.
So
Okay,
in
okay.
Bala tradition, they were using, I recall, crystal balls.
Yes, and then there's another option for representing the mind of an enlightenment as a crystal ball, which is supposedly common in the Vajrayana or Dzogchen or Mahamudra traditions, and seems to be unique to our our tradition. I don't know that others. No, sorry, it's not unique. It occurs in other Tibetan traditions. They use it, and you see it in. Early on, they've used a crystal ball for many centuries as a representation of the mind. So Talopa uses it when he gives transmission initially to Naropa. After he tortures him for 12 years, he accepts him as a student and gives him all these initiations, and he shows him all these different symbols. And Naropa, one by one, explains what they are. It's very cool. Interchange, and one of them is a crystal ball. Sit on a comfortable seat and let your body and mind settle naturally. Cut off the flow of extraneous wishful thinking. If you do not cut the flow of each of such thoughts at this point, the reverberations of that will definitely show up as problems when you try to maintain the main spiritual practices. Next, you must have bodhicitta to begin your spiritual practices. It ensures that whatever you do as a main practice will be a cause for awakening. So this is sort of an essential in all Tibetan traditions except for Shambhala, where like when you sit, you should always like do a little, some sort of bodhicitta connection or refuge in bodhicitta connection, which is why we do that handy little two-line chant at the beginning in order that all sentient beings maintain. But Robert.
So, but in Shambhala, they did do a lot of wind horse raising.
Oh, they do tons and tons of chants in the morning and everything, but um, I think Tibetans would do like every session they would do some chants. But, and wind horse raising, that's an interesting tradition. Wind horse raising. Main practices: keep clearly on your mind the number of objects of meditation that are to be cultivated in their sequence, whether they are objects of meditation discussed already, such as contemplating impermanence, or objects of meditation involving characteristics, or the lack of characteristics, which have yet to be explained, forthcoming attractions. So this implies, which is also traditional Tibetan, that one would do meditation on a number of different objects, which is not particularly the Shambhala tradition. And most traditions also have simplified to one object. But he's referring to having covered the preliminaries known as the Nundro practices that also included the four reminders. A couple of chapter, or earlier in this chapter rather, he's sort of assuming that those are things that are repeated in each session. And so those are objects of meditation. And so do them in the right order. Um, and then this characteristics and lack of characteristics we'll get into in the Mahamudra Shamatha chapter. That's a specialty of the Mahamudra tradition, that way of identifying objects as either having characteristics or not. Arouse a strong resolve, thinking, I will not let my mind stray into jumbling up. I wonder what the Tibetan is for that. The various meditation objects, taking one thing from the beginning, another from the end. Then with mindfulness and alertness, practice correctly according to the number and sequence of the objects for meditation. I know many people do that. They do shamatha, they do chonglen, they do some recitation or visualization, or they'll contemplate different things, and then they'll, so they have like a little order of things that they do. Trungpa Rinpoche, however, was of the opinion that the less you do, the better. And just to like sit and follow your breath gave you a greater aptitude in connecting with that breath and developing on the path of meditation. If you don't do that and instead practice with some meditation objects and not others of a particular sequence, with some mindfulness, some distraction, it's said that you will fall into the bad habit of doing that and will have problems in your spiritual practice throughout your life. Therefore, from the outset, it is essential to guide your mind in a straightforward and sequential manner. Interesting and very good advice as a beginner. If you try to sustain your concentration on an object of meditation for a long time, right from the start, your mind will come under the sway of dullness and agitation. If you fall into that bad habit, it will be hard to correct later on. Thus, as a beginner, you should meditate for short sessions frequently. It is said short sessions are without problems. Repeating them increases your excellent qualities. So they're quite serious about short sessions. And in fact, there's a difference between sessions and um, what we might call periods of time where we're um, practicing effectively. And like when we're with the object and we're together and we're doing the practice in a way that we feel is good, versus at some point that devolves, and we'll see a suggestion at some point to take a little break when that happens. and then reconnect with the object. And that can be literally, that can be 15, 20, can be 24 minutes, that sacred number of 24, or it can be anything lower, 20, 15, 10, 5, even, just like connecting with the practice. And when that deteriorates, you take a break and then go back at it again, which is also very different than the Trump Rinpoche system. Mary Beth.
Might that happen though, like in one sit? Like if you say, oh, I'm going to sit for a half an hour, might you have like many sessions where you're sort of on and then you lose it and then you sort of
Totally.
ground?
That's what I thank you for clarifying that. I was trying to describe that and saying that their use of the term session is not actually equivalent to ours, identical to ours. For us, we say like a session is like when you ring the gong and at the end of a sitting, and or you switch to walking meditation, or you go about your day. Whereas for them, it's like when you're with the practice in a focused way. That's, as long as that remains, that's a session. And then when that deteriorates, so like within a 30-minute session, you might have 30. Within a 30-minute sitting, you might have 30 sessions. Hopefully it's a little less than that, like maybe 5 or something sessions of like being there for like 5 or 10 minutes continuously, and then it devolves. And actually, like sort of recognizing that and refreshing, so Trump Rinpoche calls this refreshing the practice, or
Fresh start.
thank you very much, fresh start. Sounds like a detergent or something, right? Or a deodorant. Let's see. Short sessions are without problems. Repeating them increases your excellent qualities. I love that. It's like a little jingle. Given this, it is taught that if you stop when the object of meditation is clear and then meditate again, you'll have less fatigue and be enthusiastic about resuming rather your meditation. I love this advice. It's like, quit while you're ahead, and it leaves a positive taste in the mouth, as we would say, and then you're happy to revisit it. Whereas in Trungpa Rinpoche's world, you sit these long sessions and your mind just like turns into mush and you're like, but he was doing that for a different purpose. And maybe and we should talk about that when we get to the comparison with his technique. But it's actually very different. On the other hand, if you let yourself get weary with meditation, you will not want to meditate later on. Once you have a bit of stability, increase the length of the sessions. Later, having some familiarization, your endurance in meditation will increase and it will become your natural way. And so like to wrap up this issue of sessions, I think they would say that there's a period of meditation. We have the 6 periods of the day or something like that. And he said there's 4 periods of practice when you're doing sustained practice. So they would say that within a period, there's many sessions. Later, having some familiarization, your endurance and meditation will increase and it'll become your natural way. If you always keep your sessions short, you will get stuck in that routine, and spiritual practice will not become your natural mode at any point in your lifetime. Interesting, these comments about like how these habits might develop and become ingrained, and that we should be very careful um, how we get habituated with what sort of habituations we encounter. Concluding, when you've suspended your session, share the virtue of your spiritual practice with all sentient beings, dedicated as a cause for unsurpassable awakening. Make pure aspiration prayers, because it is explained that those who will ensure that the roots of virtue are not lost, not wasted, and will increase. It's funny, many Tibetan teachers that come to our Shambhala centers, they would like, we would do chants at the beginning of a talk, um, sometimes not, and they would like there was this like this play where they would wait for us to do it, and then they would do theirs, and they would like do a whole bunch of chants in Tibetan, and at the end, they would like expect us to do the dedication of merit. And the ones that have come before and like know us, they're like, well, they like prod us to do the dedication of merit, which wasn't always like common for us to do. I think it's become much more common at the end of basically any gathering. We've all become more accustomed to doing the dedication of merit, which is good. Between sessions, with the appropriate qualities conducive to liberation that were explained above, preserving ethical conduct, restraining your sense faculties, sleeping on your right side, and so on, you should apply yourself to activities that amass merit and wisdom and purify negative karma, such as the 10 Dharma activities, prostrations, and circumambulations. However, if upon leaving your sessions you do not bother with any of that, meaning you do not make any effort towards being mindful and aware of the object of meditation you're training with, and you let your mind go wherever it wants, you will not make much progress in your spiritual practice. Therefore, strive to sustain the view of and reflections upon your object of meditation and related Dharma practice, and repeatedly cultivate flashes of mindful awareness of them. I know that we probably all have experienced this occurrence of like realizing that we need to do something while we're sitting, and like at the end, like jumping up to do that. So should try to have some sort of stability about that alertness. Sue.
So, this brings up something I've often kind of wondered about. Like, if you kind of like keep your object of meditation throughout the day, I sometimes wonder, is it like turning into like a habit that's not like somehow that's not good? And so, the way he was saying to do that, so I'm just curious about it. Like, can it be habitual to um, touch the breath, let go? You know, if that's your object, follow the breath out, let go. Um, Always, like, can you, like, if you have part of your mind on that all the time, is that half-assed and a habit, or is it training?
I
Or
yeah, I'd be curious what others think, but I think the traditional tradition, as we see right here, is that that's good, and that like creates continuity to your practice. I feel like Trungpa Rinpoche was more of the opinion that after in between sessions, one should maintain those qualities, the three qualities of mindfulness, alertness, and conscientiousness, but the objects should shift from the breath to whatever one encounters, um, and experience the phenomenal world within that context of mindfulness, alertness, and conscientiousness, as opposed to continuing to focus on the breath. I know that he particularly didn't like when Westerners would wear malas around their wrists, and we would encounter Western monks who would always like repeat mantras all day long, like while you're talking to them, and they're talking, and he did not like that. Any other? Okay, thank you. Mahamudra approaches. Mary Beth.
Well, just one thing, because when Sue asked that question, it reminded me of like a time when you said you had to kind of, well, the word destroy comes to mind, but that's so violent. But it was sort of like that you have to like, you can't be too attached. You know, when you got it going good, you can't be too attached to that. And somehow when Sue asked that question, it kind of reminded me of that uncomfortable advice that you gave one time. So is it?
That's great. So there's a certain phase in Mahamudra practice which is a little bit advanced in, and I think it's probably in the sustaining section. I'm not quite sure, but at some point you have to, and we were reading this text, the Royal Seal of Mahamudra, by the third Kamcho Rinpoche, which is a wonderful text on Mahamudra. But we'll see it in this text as well as it comes up in other texts. This notion of letting go of the formality of the effort to meditate as like a conscious activity that you're doing, and because at a certain point it becomes like you're preoccupied more with the um, the structures that we use in meditation practice than the qualities that we're cultivating. We're not focused on the breath in order to understand the breath, right? We're focused on the breath or some other object in order to create a foundation in our mind stream for liberation, for understanding the true nature of reality. And at a certain point in the presentation of the Mahamudra system, they use this, as Mary Beth said, a violent term of destroying your meditation, destroying like the aspect of it which is can be described as a contrivance, that we're like continuing to use the specifics of the technique and the practice to create a certain frame of mind, instead of realizing that that frame of mind is a launching pad for going beyond mind, basically.
So
And
the idea is to not let form supplant function.
thank you. That's cool. That's good. And it's a very Mahamudra and Dzogchen way of approaching the path, and I think that was Trungpa Rinpoche's way very much as well. That um, outside of meditation practice, we should be doing that. We should be letting go of the specifics of the structure and trying to experience our world with the qualities that we cultivate. Mahamudra approaches the actual explanation of the way to cultivate Mahamudra has two parts, starting with the presentation of the divisions of the meditative process. Broadly speaking, there are two approaches to meditating on the definitive meaning. Did you know that we were meditating on the definitive meaning, that was the point? So that sort of goes to what Mary Beth is saying, of like, you know, um, if we're fixated on the breath and maintaining that structure type of a meditation, we actually can and not necessarily, we can limit our practice from the point of practice, which is to understand the definitive meaning, which goes back to the way that Vipassana was presented in this text in the so-called common tradition of meditation, the first part of the book, where Vipassana is all about understanding and cultivating and then experiencing the view, meditating upon the view. So definitive meaning. The instantaneous types, all of you guys who are of the highest abilities, begin by cutting through their misinterpretations about the view and then cultivate the methods for resting their mind right within that view. You're done. That's it. The gradual types, me, who are either of intermediate or lesser abilities, the latter, as me, begin by investigating the view from within their cultivation of the still mind and the like, and then they familiarize themselves with the view, which is another way of saying we cultivate shamatha, and then on the basis of that, we cultivate vipassana. Cultivation of the still mind is what shamatha is about. Among these two approaches, the glorious Sarha, Shawaripa, Indrabhuti, Tilopa, Maitripa, and others teach the first approach from the perspective of those of highest abilities. which is why it can sometimes be not that helpful to focus exclusively on their texts, on the Dohas and these very advanced Mahamudra texts that just like present uh, from the beginning to end. They just present the ultimate view, the ultimate practice, and like Nagarjuna to some extent does this in his root text on Madhyamaka, on the middle way. And if you're not able to actually experience that and let go of all reference points and concepts, then it doesn't actually help to continue to try to practice what those texts are espousing, but to begin in to pursue a more gradual path. The Dharma treatises of Maitreya, the 5 divisions of the Yogacara Bhumi, which is by Asanga, Kamalashila, stages of meditation, and Ratnakara Shanti's instructions on Prajnaparamita, present the latter approach from the perspective of those of intermediate abilities on down to beginner or lesser abilities. In Tibet, the approach of meditating on the ultimate essence is found in the teachings of some early Kadampas. It is present in the esoteric instructions of Mahamudra that the exalted Lord Atisha received from Dombipa as transmitted by Indrabhuti, and in the transmission from Daljorpa and Gonpowa, students of the exalted Lord Atisha. Nevertheless, most of what Drumtonpa, who was Atisha's main student, or Dharma heir, transmitted to the 3 brothers who were the next holders of the Kadampa lineage, Potowa, Puchongwa, and Cheng Nawa. And when you read about the transmission of Atisha's lineage, you are told that there were these 3 the teachings went to these 3 brothers, and that they specialized in slightly different things. One of them specialized in the Lojong and the scholarly part. One of them focused more on the practice lineage of Shamatha Vipassana Mahamudra, and then I think a second one, I don't know, probably did both, but I'm not sure. Let's see. Most of what Drumtonpa transmitted to the 3 brothers is sutra-oriented stages of meditation based on the stages of the path. So that's why what we think of when we hear Atisha and his lineage, we don't think of Mahamudra or Vajrayana at all. We think of Sutrayana, focused practices and studies. The Exalted Gampopa's instructional tradition contains both styles mentioned above, meaning instantaneous and gradual, many esoteric instructions based on secret mantra perfection processes, so creation and completion, and more. Nevertheless, his approach emphasizes the stages of meditation of Mahamudra, where first misinterpretations about the view are eliminated, and then that view is brought into experience using the techniques for resting. He doesn't go on about this at too much length, because in the Tibetan tradition it's sort of taken for granted that one spends quite a bit of time doing this process that he calls eliminating misinterpretations about the view. This is a stage that's often skipped in the West, and we dive into Mahamudra meditation. And I think what the author is saying is that that's a stage that should not be skipped. And then that view is brought into experience using the techniques for resting. So we have shamatha, we have vipassana, which is bringing the view into experience, and then we rest in the view, the experience of the view. The esoteric instructions of the dohas. So the dohas are collections of songs by those early masters, root symbols and secret conduct. Other esoteric texts which were transmitted by Maitripa's student Bharatapani, Indian Vajrapani, and others spread later in Tibet are in keeping with the exalted Gampopa's instructional tradition, confirming the very pure sources and authenticity of Gampopa's instructions. Some assert that meditation on the true nature must be based on the explanations found in the sutra-oriented texts, which seems to be what he just said in terms of eliminating misconceptions about the view. They criticize the esoteric instructions of the Mahasiddhas, which is not what he just said, which, by emphasizing Vipassana right from the start, are not in accordance with those sutra-oriented texts. So here he explains that those texts by Tilopa, Maitripa, Naropa, and Sarha that are very advanced texts present Vipassana right off the bat. That amounts to having contempt for the Mahasiddhas, including authors of the treatises and the seven city texts. We've seen this list before, the sixfold essence cycle and authors of esoteric instructions of the great secret mantra. It also shows they simply do not understand the meaning expressed in the earlier authoritative text and the later authoritative text, which is a very odd name for a text, but seems to be the name of the names of two texts. A powerful medicine for the gradual type is a strong poison for the instantaneous type. Powerful meditation for the instantaneous type is poison for the gradual type. By overly believing in the explanation found in the sutra-oriented text that without physical and mental suppleness, shamatha will not be attained, without which Vipassana will not be achieved, and without those two there will be no realization of suchness, they conclude that achievement of that approach cannot and will not occur these days. So, what did he just say? He said, forget about it, it's hopeless. He said that some people hold to the view that without physical and mental suppleness, shamatha will not be attained. So, unless shamatha is brought to the cultivated to the point of experiencing the stages or the aspects of experience described in the traditional treatises on shamatha, which includes these two types of suppleness, that it's not really attained, and without that you can't practice Vipassana. And so that is very different than the Mahamudra tradition, which is has a more moderate view that you need to practice shamatha in order to practice Vipassana, but they don't feel that you need to have completed shamatha in the formal way that is presented in the sutra tradition. Saying now is not a time for meditation, they cause themselves and others to turn their backs on meditation. That is quite absurd. If it were true, it would mean that the various kinds of dharma the Buddha taught in relation to different levels of abilities are incorrect. It also causes them to amass the karma of abandoning the dharma of the great secrets, esoteric instructions. And he's invoked the most heinous of activities in the Buddhist tradition, which is to abandon any aspect of the Dharma, to abandon any Dharma by disparaging that Dharma. And there's a famous quote by Atisha where he says, realizing all teachings as precepts for practice, one will avoid the disparagement of Dharma and be happy. I can't remember the last line, but something like that. So realizing that all the teachings are valid for different stages or different types of individuals in different situations. So abandoning the Dharma, which involve little effort, of the great secrets in esoteric instructions, which involve little effort but great benefit, in the Dharma, the many short paths that arose from the Mahasiddhas' own practices, never disparaging them. This Togpo practice lineage contains both instructional traditions. One is taught for the instantaneous, who first eliminate their misinterpretations concerning the ground and root, which is another way of saying the view of the ultimate nature, true nature, and are then taught the techniques for resting in the experience of the true nature, or that ground. The other is provided for the gradual type who first pursue mental stillness and then are led to Vipassana gradually. Although these days most people, being of the type that has a very clear and active mind, would at this point be more appropriately guided according to the first approach. Interestingly, he's saying that people with clear and active minds. Here I will give the explanation according to the latter approach in consideration of what is better known as at the moment. He doesn't really say why, but I think from experience we see that, like Westerners in particular, are very smart. We're way more educated than the average Buddhist practitioner in India and Tibet was. Cynthia.
And I was just going to say this at the time that this was actually written, we're reading it and we could think of it as meaning now, but in fact, that now is when, some centuries ago.
Yeah, 400 or 500 years ago. That's right.
Right. So that's kind of an interesting little twist there.
That is indeed. So, but we've seen that, like, there's many very smart people in the West who have been introduced to these teachings, and without practicing them, they don't actually bring that much benefit. That instantaneous approach has not really worked with some of them, let's say. Shamatha. The explanation of the meditation process in this context, meaning the Mahamudra uncommon context, this is 4 parts. First, the process of instruction has 2 parts, the instructions of Shamatha, which has 7 divisions, the first of which is preparations necessary for Shamatha. And just to back up, I skipped, so there's 2 sections of instruction, Shamatha Vipassana, of course, and then going up to the top of the page, so the 4 parts, the process of instruction, the process of the pointing out instructions in spiritual practice comes after the Vipassana and instructions, and then the way to sustain the practice of meditation, having experienced it genuinely, and the way realization develops through the sustaining meditation, meaning the 4 stages, the 4 yogas of Mahamudra. One pointedness, freedom from elaborations, one taste, and non-meditation. Shamatha has 7 sections: preparations, the physical pose, the way to focus the mind on an object, actual objects for practicing mental stillness. And interestingly, you will see that he uses the term mental stillness basically as synonymous with shamatha. The way to sustain mental stillness with these approaches, the process of achieving mental stillness, and the purpose of practicing mental stillness. Preparations. Your practice must include an understanding of what was presented above in the general explanation of shamatha vipassana, such as the reliance on the causes for achieving shamatha, and especially the identification and elimination of the causes for dullness and agitation. So we're referring back to the section on shamatha in the earlier part of the book. Moreover, this part, in a very secluded place such as New York City, one unfrequented by other people during the day, with little noise at night, and where all the necessary conditions of water, wood, and so forth are available, you should cast aside anything that causes you physical or mental distraction. Establish the boundaries for your retreat. So, as the translator implies by inserting the word retreat, he's giving instructions for a retreat practice, practicing this in the format of a retreat intensive practice. Whereas for most of us, we want to know how to build it into our daily practice ongoingly, more realistically. On the other hand, it'd be nice to have like a Mahamudra retreat focused on just Mahamudra practice, wouldn't it? Anyway, establish the boundaries for your retreat and be slow and gentle, mimicking the behavior of a sick person. Be slow and gentle, mimicking the behavior of a sick person. Oh, I can't go out tonight. I'm not feeling well. Your practice should certainly include elements that were laid out above: restraining your sense faculties, alert behavior, moderation of food, sleeping on your right side, and so forth. Because without those, it is difficult to achieve mental stillness. As the exalted Lord Atisha explains, when shamatha and its branches are impaired, you may meditate with intense exertion for 1,000 years, but you will not produce any samadhi. The physical posture for practice in meditative concentration. Naropa says the way to rest the body is the key to meditation. Interesting that it says the way to rest the body. There's a saying in the practice lineage: if you want your mind to rest, keep your body in the meditation posture. It is also said that by arranging the interdependent connections within the body, realization will arise in the mind. All of those attest to the importance of the essential points for the body. The generally well-known 7-point posture of meditative concentration is as follows. On a soft and comfortable cushion, which is not what we use. We don't use a soft cushion. We tend to favor a hard cushion. Sit in the Vajra position, or if that is not possible, in the Bodhisattva position, or anything in between, where one can have it supports an upright spine. Hold your hands in the mudra of equipoise, meaning your right palm rests on top of your left with the tips of your thumbs touching 4-finger widths below your navel. Straighten your spine and keep your entire body taut. That doesn't sound like relaxed. Keep your upper arms and elbows straight, not bent, and your shoulders raised. So I want you to realize that these are very different instructions than what we use for sitting meditation. He's basically giving the posture that one uses in the 6 dharmas of Naropa practice for some reason. So if you've not tried this before, I urge you to give it a try, just to see, can you keep your elbows straight and have your hands in your lap? It's actually really hard to do. And so, yeah, you have to raise up your shoulders like Cynthia and Mary Beth are doing. And even then, it's difficult. And it certainly does not feel relaxed. So it's a little bit funny that he's presenting this. But bend your neck slightly so that your chin presses lightly towards your Adam's apple. That's a
The
common
image
term
of a
in the Tibetan
vulture
tradition.
comes to mind.
Yes, a vulture is often used as the analogy for this. Rest the tip of your tongue on your palate. Leave a bit of space between your upper and lower teeth and barely close your lips. So he has the lips closed slightly. Your eyes should be in a peaceful gaze, looking into the space beyond the tip of your nose, neither moving nor closed. Now, he didn't specify a length. Some texts will give you an actual length of the space in front of your nose, which is often extremely much shorter than any one of us would be comfortable with like a foot or 6 inches or 4 inches in front of your nose, which would basically results in a cross-eyed sort of gaze, unless you're able to really relax your gaze like that. Yeah, use your finger, Okay. Since this position resembles the way the Buddha Vairochana is seated, it is called the 7-point posture of Vairochana. What is he referring to, the Buddha Vairochana? Who is this Buddha Vairochana? Does anybody remember the Buddha Vairochana that he's talking about? Yeah.
Is he one of the Buddhas in the 5 Buddha families?
I
No.
think so. Is he the Buddha family?
I think so.
Yeah. But he's talking about the Buddha Vairochana, which is when you read the cosmology, the Vajrayana cosmology, version of the cosmology. The universe consists of the Buddha Vairochana sitting in the meditation posture, and in every pore of his body is what's called a trichiliocosm, which is a thousand world systems times to the third power. 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000 world systems is in each pore of his body. And our trichiliocosm is in the middle of his right palm. So we have a very good location. You know what they say about real estate: location, location, location. Anyway, enough joking around. It's called the 7-point posture of Rochana. Some include the explanation to leave your lips and teeth just as they are, but this presentation is better. 2 of Kamala Shila's stages of meditation state that in addition to these 7 points, you should inhale and exhale without making a sound, panting or breathing heavily, and let your breath flow in and out without any sense of its movement, gently and effortlessly. So this is a modulation of the breath to make it very gentle and smooth. And Trungpa Rinpoche was very, his instructions were very different from that. Don't manipulate the breath. But as we, I think, probably all know at this point, as you meditate more and more, your breath naturally becomes very gentle and flows effortlessly. Their explanation of an 8-point physical posture is most excellent. Meaning the 2 of Kamala Shila's stages. Furthermore, the Vajramala Tantra states your shoulders should be even, tongue and palate joined, teeth and lips at ease, and your gaze directed towards the tip of your nose. Cross-eyed. Acharya Amita Vajra instructs: sit in a comfortable seat in the Vajra position with your hands in the mudra of equipoise, straighten your body and bend your neck. Naropa teaches: now will explain the key points for the body like jewels strung on a reed. Be very straight and then bend. Tighten internally like L, like L and R. So these are letters in the Sanskrit alphabet. The L and R with the little dots underneath them means what's called a retroflex letter. And one pronounces them in a very odd way. They're hard to pronounce for us. But he's talking about the shape of the letters. The shape of the letters is that they're straight, and then at top they have a curve over, like the vulture that Rob mentioned. And sit in the Vajra, in the knot-like position, meaning the Vajra posture. Pull up to your full potential, which seems to be talking about the shoulders or the spine pushing upward. Press with the mudra of equipoise, which is the hands, and be crossed like a lattice. Specific to another context, the other lines describe strengthening the spine, bending the neck, keeping the body taut, raising the shoulders, and holding the mudra of equipoise. Crossed like a lattice is specific to another context, probably refers to the 6 Dharma practices of Naropa, beginning with the Tummo practice, the inner heat. The purpose or benefits of using those essential points for the body are as follows. The leg position controls the downward expelling wind. Pressing with the mudra of equipoise below the navel retains the fire coinciding wind. Strengthening the spine and holding the body taut controls the pervading wind. Not bending the elbows and upper arms and stretching up the shoulders holds the life force wind. Bending the neck and resting the tongue and the palate controls the upward moving wind. By controlling those root winds, the secondary winds are naturally controlled, and specifically an unwavering gaze controls the secondary winds. An unwavering gaze. Some traditions you see not blinking, believe it or not. It is explained that those points of the physical posture cause the channels, winds, and bodhicitta bindus to abide in their own places and be stable. So the posture causes the aspects of the subtle body to settle into their natural or most beneficial places. Those in turn balance your body's elements and enhance your complexion. So your acne will go away. One of the major benefits of meditation. And since the operative sense consciousnesses are not engaging their object, samadhi naturally arises. Mind stillness and agitation lessen, and awareness becomes clear and lucid. Also, there's some texts that say have a saliva cloth on your lap. So there's some traditions where you keep your mouth open slightly, which can lead to drooling. And literally, there's a tradition of having a cloth on your lap for the drool. Weird as that sounds. Anyway, um, samadhi naturally arises, mind stillness and agitation less, and awareness becomes clear and lucid. The problems associated with incorrect posture are described by those aware of the esoteric instructions of this practice lineage. If you lean to the right, at first you'll experience clarity, but then you'll be followed by many thoughts related to perceived objects. If you drift towards the left, at first it will be bliss, but later you will have many thoughts related to the perceiving subject. If you lean forward initially, you will have sharp clarity, but later on your mind will be turbulent. If you lean backwards to begin with, there will be brilliance and spaciousness, but it will be followed by much distraction. If you change your gaze, your operative consciousnesses will engage, and you will have many thoughts. I think we've all experienced that last one. The Shravaka Bhumi by Asanga explains, which is one of the five texts of the Yogacara Bhumi, explains that this physical posture quickly brings suppleness, enables us to sit in it for a long time, and does not cause physical exhaustion. This posture is superior to that of the Tirthakas. I don't know what their posture is, and our adversaries. When others see us in this posture, they're inspired. Since the Buddha and the Shravaka disciples use this posture, we should too. The way to focus the mind on an object of meditation. We should engage the object of meditation with enthusiasm for cultivating samadhi. Since that enthusiasm comes from seeing the excellent qualities of samadhi, the sutras present those in terms of the broad reasons that we should meditate on the Dharma. As it is said, if you do not meditate on this Dharma, you will not see Dharmata, just seeing and hearing about water but not drinking. It doesn't alleviate thirst. The common excellent qualities of meditative concentration are described in the Samchayagata. Meditative concentration dispenses with inferior sense pleasures and makes awareness, supercognitive abilities, and samadhis manifest. Supercognitive abilities. Also, there's a set of 6 supercognitive abilities that one is said to gain access to through the completion of shamatha. Specifically, when we achieve shamatha, our physical and mental joy and happiness increase, and our mind is able to focus on its object. Mental distractions, which are distortions, are automatically pacified, thus preventing much negative conduct. Excellent qualities such as the supercognitive abilities and miraculous powers are achieved on the basis of which the realizations of Vipassana develop. Once those arise and are sustained, we see the temporal and ultimate excellent qualities such as swift liberation from cyclic existence. Keeping those in mind, we should engage the object of meditation. Maitreya's differentiation of the middle and the extremes explains there are the basis, what is based on that, causes and results. The basis is the basis of effort, having a strong motivation to pursue samadhi. What is based on that is strong effort. The ability to be diligent consistently. Causes are the causes of our motivation, the faith that entails seeing the excellent qualities of samadhi and being enraptured by them. Results are the results of efforts. Achieving physical and mental suppleness, we should understand those points and then concentrate our mind on the object of meditation. So this was a fairly straightforward reading tonight, and I didn't include enough of it, so I'm going to vote that we continue on until our time has lapsed, unless there are comments or questions. about what we've gone through or related issues. So
I
I'll
think
pause momentarily. Rob?
I think this part about effort could maybe use a little, you know, we could talk a little bit about that. I mean, this practice is a lot about letting go and accepting at the same time, right? I mean,
Yeah,
we're opening up.
yeah. So what is the effort then?
Effort can be tricky here.
Yeah, so how do we interpret effort correctly here then? So that it's not preventing the relaxing and the opening up
You know,
by,
like
by effort that pushes.
right? There's a chance that we might try too hard.
Yeah. So what kind of effort do we, what effort to do what?
So this has to do with view, I think.
Me.
Well, the view
Oh, the view, sorry.
from the
I
very
thought you said
beginning.
you.
Well, yeah, well, with yourself, but with oneself, just the view that one has about what we're doing.
I think it also has to do with what you were getting at initially, which is that in order to not perpetuate our normal mode of approaching things, which is like to push and to try to achieve and like to do it as a way of occupying ourselves, that actually requires effort. It actually requires constant effort to let go of our habitual pattern of doing that, of like wanting to do something correctly and achieve some result from it, expecting something to happen and like pushing ourselves and that whole
So the
cycle.
so the trick is to recognize that impulse.
Yeah, to recognize it and be able to let go of it. That's the effort, those two things. Because recognizing it doesn't always result in letting go of it, right?
Sometimes it makes
So,
it worse.
so yeah, so that actually requires great effort to constantly like realize our whole being has been conditioned to a certain mode of approaching things since the moment we were born, if not before. And changing that pattern requires the effort of mindfulness, alertness, and conscientiousness about what we're doing and how we're doing and why we're doing it, which returns to the view that you mentioned earlier. Sue.
Is what about the effort paramita and the
Mm.
five strengths? Does that related to this?
Yeah, what say you, Rob?
I think the effort paramita diligence. Yes and no. It's related because as below, so as above in that sense. Form and function being one. But I think the paramita of diligence really has to do with conscious diligence in everything you do, like with the proper view. And this diligence has more to do with like it's almost beyond words. It's the diligence of noticing what's happening
Mhm.
and then like noticing what's happening and then noticing whether it's correct or not.
Yeah, it's really focused. This type of effort is focused on attitude, and the
Mhm.
paramita of this of effort includes the attitude and motivation, also, but also includes the motivatedness, the way that we then put those into activity in order to accomplish the aims of ourselves and others.
Right, like
All such
starting a
things.
charity or something, big
Yeah,
event.
yeah, yeah. Diligence in practicing generosity, discipline, and patience, as well as meditative concentration and wisdom. Anything else? Shall we
It's
go
just that
on?
on the cushion it can be so tricky because it, it, it's so so
it is, and it reminds me of the guidance that he just gave us of like noticing bad habits that we have that we bring into our practice and trying not to perpetuate them, like sitting without really trying to sit. I think is like sort of sums it up, like taking the posture but not like really being in meditation. I think that's a big one.
It's interesting, the idea of enthusiasm,
Yeah,
because it's
exactly.
like genuine. It sort of implies like genuine. You're genuine.
Yeah, you're inhabiting your body
Yeah,
fully.
like the intention from the night before.
Right.
Okay, here we
Flows through.
go. It's
Yeah.
finally time.
Debbie.
I just wanted to comment back when it said the part about I'm going to wake up ready to whatever. It's actually taught currently in neuroscience, and it's dream, sleep and wake. You want to remember your dreams. When you're going to sleep, you tell yourself, I am going to remember my dreams. And it
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah. That whole practice of lucid dreaming or remembering your dreams, uh, developing that intention, and then uh, reinforcing that intention rather, as much as possible, including just before you sleep, but also during the day, like thinking about your dreams and so forth. It really makes a big difference. But so the actual objects for practicing mental stillness has two parts, those involving characteristics and then shamatha without characteristics. That involving characteristics has two sections, with support and without supports, or objects with supports and objects without. And objects involving characteristics with supports has two divisions, the actual objects and then the identification of the mental stillness that results from meditation upon them. The actual objects of meditation, individuals of lesser intelligence at the beginning of their pursuit of mental stillness may use any appropriate method for concentration, as Tilopa says, using various kinds of methods, gazes and ways of concentrating. Hold your mind in awareness until it is still. The sutras and Kamala-Shila's stages of meditation explain that we will achieve mental stillness by focusing on the form of the Tathagata as the first object of meditation. Those of the practice lineage, however, consider it easier to give rise to mental stillness by concentrating on an ordinary object. Because meditators of lesser intelligence can find it difficult to generate an image of the Tathagata's form as a mental object right from the start. Interesting distinction. Therefore, they provide two ways to concentrate the mind, focusing on something impure, such as a pebble or a twig, and focusing on something pure, the Tathagata's form. They explain that during the day we can concentrate on such things as a pebble and a twig, or if that is not comfortable, sometimes on a small object in the shade. During the night, we can concentrate on white or black bindus, spheres of light of various sizes at the point between our eyebrows, or sometimes above ourselves. This is very common in these texts of Dzogchen, Mahamudra, meditation texts in the Tibetan tradition. Bindus, they're very much into points of light, little spheres of light as object of meditation to sort of capture our attention. And they place them in different places. Usually it's between the eyebrows. And then, like when you go to sleep, they say to bring it down to the throat. Direct your body loosely to those focal supports, not letting it wander to anything else, just remaining without distraction. Concentrate closely on the focal support but don't entertain thoughts that study or analyze its color, shape, or the like. So we're focusing, like let's say we're looking at a pebble or a twig. We're concentrating closely on it, but without thinking about its color, shape, or other characteristics. So we're focusing intently on the visual image of it, right? Without any commentary. Pursue a resting state that is intense. In brief, in a non-conceptual mode, not thinking anything at all, pursue a resting state that is intense and quiet. Once you have achieved a moment of such stillness, suspend your meditation while in that state of stillness. So once you connect to that object in that way, non-conceptually, without thinking, with an intensity, quiet stillness, then you interrupt it after, so that you experience that sort of positive um, taste of concentration. Once you have, after a short break, then apply yourself to resting. Again, apply yourself to resting. It's said that you should train in short sessions often. By parting on good terms with your meditation, you'll look forward to meditating again. If you become overly tired in the beginning, you'll reach a point of exhaustion and won't enjoy returning to meditation. Some say that since other texts do not teach pursuing stillness through relying on pebbles, twigs, and bindus, this kind of presentation simply demonstrates ignorance of the objects for cultivating mental stillness. But presumably he's referring to some specific text. I didn't look at the footnote, but such criticisms are most unreasonable because the purpose of these methods is to allow those of lesser intelligence to develop mental stillness easily. These are profound key points that confer great benefit with little effort. It is also not the case that other texts do not present them. Acharya Bodhibhadra states, here shamatha is twofold, one that is attained through looking inwards, and the other by focusing on something seen externally. So what he's done here, without really saying it, explaining it clearly, is he's referenced a text by an Indian author, an Indian tantric author, and thereby lend credence or author authority to this view that he's presenting, that it's positive to meditate on pebbles and sticks, because Acharya Bodhibhadra, who's a great teacher and author of the Indian Buddhist tradition, has encouraged it. He, as opposed to quoting Tibetans, you got to quote Indians. He continues with more explanation as quoted above, concluding with focusing on something seen externally is of two kinds, special and ordinary. Thus, it is permissible to use ordinary things such as pebbles and twigs. Twigs. Bodhibhadra also mentions mental concentration that is based on bindus. Focusing what is based on the body is fivefold. Focusing on the breath, on subtle symbols. Interesting. Bindus, light rays, and on joy and bliss. Nevertheless, we may wonder, is it wrong to cultivate mental stillness on the basis of a sense consciousness looking at a stick or a twig? I like the term twig. It's a technical version of stick. When mental stillness must be cultivated with the mental consciousness. This is a great question. Is it wrong to cultivate mental stillness on the basis of a sense consciousness when mental stillness must be cultivated with the mental consciousness? So he said it's a given that that concentration must be based on the mental consciousness. There's nothing wrong with that. The visual consciousness serves as the primary initiator of movement towards objects. Movement is a movement of the mind, of it clearly, towards objects for the sense consciousness. The key point is that most movements of the mental consciousnesses are related to the sense consciousnesses. By holding a gaze with a visual faculty does not move, that sense consciousness does not move, and the movements of the other sense consciousnesses are minimized. When those do not move, the mental consciousness's movements decrease. This technique makes developing stillness easy. All of this discussion of consciousness moving is um, it's figurative, of course, right? Because consciousness doesn't move, which we'll get to later. Um, this technique makes
Could I ask a question about
developing
that?
easy. Yeah,
I actually, because if consciousnesses are understood to be like momentary, right, in a
yeah.
sense, and so in that sense, I don't know whether what they're talking about when they're talking about movement is really just many successive consciousnesses as opposed to the idea of one moving, because as you said, that doesn't really make sense.
That's a great point, which he doesn't even touch upon. So he's assuming that we understand that consciousness is a stream of moments, right? And I think his use of the term movement of a consciousness would mean a difference, a change to a different object.
Or, I mean, it could in one sense just be the arising and multiple arisings of consciousness that that by holding, we're reducing the amount of arisings of consciousness, whether it's the same faculty or different faculties.
The way you're saying that is a little confusing to me, as if like we can hold consciousness to less moments than it might have otherwise.
I think what
I don't
I'm
think you mean that.
probably not. I think what I meant is that by settling the mind on one particular object and in a way that's sort of settling, it's probably it could reduce the um,
I think it means just like having the same visual object and faculty and consciousness in a stream of moments over and
right,
over again for
right,
as long as possible. And so the term movement means actually shifting your attention from one consciousness
to
moment
a
to
different one.
another.
Right, that's what I was trying to figure out how to articulate. That if you have lots
Yeah.
of different objects coming up, then you have lots of different consciousnesses arising.
Yeah, so the question is, you said if there are lots of objects coming up, and we all know that when we open our eyes, we see a zillion things at once, right?
Right,
So it's a matter of what we choose to look at,
exactly. And so
the
since we're
faculty of
choosing
attention.
to narrow it, then
Yes.
we reduce the arising of consciousnesses about other objects or other
Right. So it's really, and it's interesting he didn't say this, but it's really the movement of attention from one consciousness to either from one consciousness to another, like from visual to auditory, or from one object of the same consciousness to another. But instead, we hold our attention to the same object of consciousness over a sustained number of moments of time, of
Because
consciousness.
the experience of that is not static.
Either way.
I mean, it's not a stasis. It's a constant sense of movement, even though it's not moving.
well, are you meaning that it's the stasis? Are you talking about even with when we're
When we're sitting with
focusing on a rock?
that when we're sitting with a sense with a like a twig, and you're
Yeah.
looking at it, and mind is going quiet, the experience of that is still it's not it's there's still a sense of movement happening.
Well, I guess the thing you could say is that there's still consciousness obviously arising, but it would be like twig, consciousness of twig, consciousness of twig. It's sort of a repetitive, or you're sort of staying with one
Right,
object
but
repeatedly.
without those words.
Yeah. No, I'm just using that as, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But as
yeah.
opposed to twig, bird,
Yeah.
sky, you know,
It's like the situation is alive, is what I
Yeah.
guess what I'm trying to
But I
say.
think, Derek, your notion about movement of attention is good because that, I'm curious what it actually, whether there's any translation questions here in terms of what he actually, because the notion of movement, it does make more sense, as you say, when you're talking about it as from attention as opposed to moving consciousnesses.
Yeah, yeah. He
Thank you.
does say that movements of consciousness are minimized. When the movements of other sense consciousnesses are minimized, meaning really the movement of attention from one sense consciousness to another.
Or you
When
could say it could be
those
the arising of other consciousnesses minimized because you're not moving your attention.
and when those do not move, the mental consciousness's movements decrease.
Right. So there's less conceptuality.
I think there's less change in the encounter, in the cognitive encounter. I don't know that it has to do with conceptuality, but it's basically twigs all the way.
Right. And what I'm saying is that it's a technique to reduce chatter.
Yes. And so this technique makes developing stillness easy, directing the mind and visual consciousness towards something like a pebble or twig. So directing the mind. That would be our key functionality.
Actually, regarding what you just said in terms of the question of conceptual or not, if we're looking at, say, the pebble, and we're not particularly supposed to be, thinking about the characteristics and all that, if it's just looking at it, would that be considered as sense perception non-conceptual? Or is that the intent anyway?
That's the intent. I think it's not achievable though. That there's necessarily we create an image of the twig that we're continuing to maintain by using the visual consciousness of the twig as the support. But that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think because of the fact that we tend to use the breath and didn't grow up with twigs and pebbles as our training ground, we haven't really explored some of the nuances of that. I'm curious
Yeah. I
what
mean,
they
twigs
intend.
are not different than any other like visual or auditory object, though. In that, and so it said that the transmission of a sense consciousness to the mental consciousness is a mind moment, is a moment of consciousness, and then the mental consciousness has a moment of direct sense cognition, and then that results the next moment in conceptual consciousness of the same um, object. So it's an interesting question of like when we maintain focus on the same object, are we actually able to stay with that initial moment of because each time it's a new moment of sense consciousness because everything changes instantaneously, right?
Well,
So
right, we can't stay with that initial moment because that just by
it's
definition
gone.
you can't.
It's literally gone. Yeah.
And this
But
is where
I
effort
think the
gets,
question, I was going to say, I think the question is kind of in terms, in a sense, in terms of what the discipline is of this practice is whether, as you say, you go through that sequence of moments to the conception, to where it gets to conceptual mind, and then do you, at, do you just keep coming, try to stay with,
I think so. I mean, we all do that. We've all done this, and I think the key is that you don't let that initial conception of the sense object lead to a proliferation of other thoughts. I think it's as simple as that.
right. And I guess
That
it's even true when we're using the breath, because technically, even
yeah,
there, you're, it's an experiential feeling thing, not a concept of breath that we're aiming to hold to, right? I mean, that we're aiming to work with.
Yeah, so that the question is, at some point, do you shift from the object to the conceptual object?
Doesn't that,
And
hmm,
and I think it's understood that that is what happens, because you can't achieve samadhi on an object that's changing. And conceptual objects don't deteriorate; they don't change because they're not real things. So you can have the same conceptual object for a series of moments.
When you say that, do you mean that we're talking about the aspect in the mind,
No, the
or no?
aspect is not a conceptual object.
Okay. So you're
It's
saying that
the
we've turned
apprehension. The apprehension.
apprehension?
so we've gone from the viewing the supposed pebble in front of us to a concept of a pebble,
Well, there's the pebble, the actual pebble
right?
or twig. I like
You take your
twig.
choice. Okay.
And then there's the aspect or the representation of the twig in the visual consciousness, in the faculty. It sort of lives, it sort of makes a little molded twig in your visual faculty. And then there's the mental uh, contact with that initially is non-conceptual, and then the next moment it's
Is.
become a concept. Yes.
So doesn't it have to cut to be fresh in order to actually
But
stay
if
on
you
a
then
dot?
the
Doesn't
the
it have,
object is changing. The problem with sense consciousness is, or consciousness of a specifically characterized phenomena, to use that technical language, those technically are changing every moment, right? Because real things are impermanent. So if you want to have a sustained concentration, you need an object that's not deteriorating, because the every moment of the twig is different, right?
Sure, but then
So we'll see this described in some places. I thought we came across this at some point already, but maybe not. Mary Beth.
I'm afraid I'm not going to do a very good job of this, but he
That's a good way
did.
to set yourself up for
Sorry,
failure.
sorry. But I mean,
Take
a while right away. A low bar is a good thing to have, I guess. But
only for short people.
well, I'm short, so there you go.
Okay, you got to get a drink somehow, right? Okay, I'll let you talk. Sorry.
Before the Mahamudra class, we did have this class where we were learning about how the goal on some level is to sustain a kind of not thought that we're going to have happen again and again and again, that we're going to be able to sustain. I mean, I guess it's something close to the enlightenment, I guess, that we're trying to get to. But that has to, it's like enlightenment is where you just don't get caught on a train. You're able to like always sort of get back and remember what you're supposed to be remembering,
That's
right?
great. That's great. So, in order to do that, though, you need an object that doesn't change.
Yes, but enlightenment, does that change?
Well, enlightenment is not an object,
It's
but
not an
you're there. You're getting. So when enlightenment results from the direct cognition of what?
the true nature of reality.
Yeah, suchness, right? Or emptiness, however, whatever we want to call it. And so that is not an impermanent phenomena,
Like a
right?
concept.
Yeah, so like if we look at the chart of phenomena, there's compounded phenomena, and then there's a few uncompounded ones, and the uncompounded ones don't change, they don't deteriorate every moment. So that includes nirvana, and it included um, cessation, the two types of cessation, remember? Does that ring any bells?
Yes.
So the idea in enlightenment is that yes, there's an unchanging cognitive state of being that's focused on suchness, which doesn't change because it's that's its nature. It's an uncompounded phenomena. All compounded phenomena change radically, meaning instantaneously. How are we doing? Those of you that haven't
Well,
studied
does that
these
mean it's
topics.
easier to get back to it because it didn't change?
uh,
But if you
from
look at
some point of
any,
view, but to
I
get
know
back
you,
to suchness is, uh, it's not quite like that. I'm sorry, Sue.
okay, but I know that if you're just looking at it, you're not analyzing what it's made up of, but actually, if you, I mean, it is all nothing. So can you look at, you know, a pebble and it's there and it's not there, and that's the steady, you're,
Well, the,
going
the,
right through it like it's,
well,
I don't,
there is, there is no such thing as a pebble, right? A colored, there's a color. When we look at a pebble, we see color and shape.
but we're not looking at that, remember? That's how it started. We're not looking at the color or the shape. So, yeah.
We're not thinking about them,
Okay.
but there is no pebble other than color, colors in a certain shape, right? So when he was
Okay.
speaking about that, he was not speaking in definitive terms.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Okay.
great. I love this.
Okay.
Oh, we're at overtime
But,
also.
but, uh,
So, like a minute ago, he said, it's understood that, he says, mental stillness must be
it must be
cultivated with the
cultivated with
mental
the mental.
consciousness, right? And unless your mental consciousness is enlightened, you're in a conceptual mental consciousness. Because
Wait, he starts that out as a question. So maybe the answer is yes, it's
well,
wrong.
the question was not about that. The question was, can it be wrong to cultivate mental stillness on a sense object since we're just using it as a support for the mental consciousness?
I mean, it's skillful means. It's obviously it's a method. It's a method to bring us closer. And
Or you can use an internal, like a bindu. Those are not,
Form
you
of
know,
gradual approach.
like if you use a bindu is not a specifically characterized phenomenon. Why don't we talk about that as the object? What's going on there? The bindu is not deteriorating every moment.
Or just
'Cause
your sense of awareness even.
So I guess it boils down to what extent does this impact your ability to accomplish stillness? The resolution of this quandary.
Mm-hmm. Right, because we're in shamatha.
Yeah, yeah, but it is an
And we're,
interesting question. We'll have to find some good source that addresses this. We have come across it in, our 20 years of courses on this. So if only the memory works well, the memory banks, we could dredge it. But anyway, why don't we pause here at the end of this paragraph just to reiterate the last couple of sentences. This technique makes developing stillness easy, meaning using a sense consciousness, directing the mental or visual consciousness towards something like a pebble or a twig is merely a symbol. Reminding the mind to not wander somewhere else, that's helpful. It is analogous to remembering a point on the basis of a mnemonic. What's an example of a mnemonic that we use? remember something.
Like the alphabet song?
The alphabet song.
That one about peanut butter and jelly, and then you can do Pluto, Jupiter.
Oh, the planets, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know
What
any,
about,
Oh
but
yeah. Oh yeah.
well, what about gosh darn, please eat my pizza? That's my favorite one for the Paramitas. That's how I remember them.
Gosh darn, please don't
Please eat my,
eat.
please eat, no, gosh darn, please eat my pizza. It's a way
Gosh
to
darn,
remember the
please eat. Why would you want
generosity,
somebody to eat your pizza, though?
I,
because you're a
I
generous bodhisattva. So it's, I think Pema Trojan came up with this,
Speak
didn't
for
she?
yourself. I don't know.
Do you guys
it's
know this though?
sometimes
Gosh, generosity,
I've
discipline.
heard it from you before. That apparently
Someone
pays.
taught it to me, and it's like I find it very useful.
Yeah, it came up in some
never heard.
class. That's right. Gosh darn. Did we finish like a mnemonic? Okay, so that's where we are. Let's try to remember where we are. Page 186, and the end of the second paragraph. And on that note, let's dedicate our merit. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone. That was fun, especially at the end there. Take care and see
Bye
you soon.
bye.